Okay, so welcome to the presentation. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend. My name is Denise Barton, Dr. Barton. I have a PhD in Business Administration with a concentration in HR, and I am a faculty member here at Wake Tech teaching classes. So if you see my name, Denise Barton, sign up. So what we're going to cover today is metacognition, which is basically thinking about thinking. So when you're studying, it's not as simple as you're reading through and learning items. You really have to use methods to try to make sure that you are actually learning information and retaining information. So the way that today is going to work is we're going to see a series of videos. You'll look at the videos and learn information, and then we'll have a 2-minute chat for you to list anything that you learned. Or if you're more comfortable cutting on your mic, then to make you can make a comment about that video. We'll try to hold it though to about 2 minutes maximum, so be prepared as soon as the video is over to start the chat. You can probably, while you're watching the video, put information in the chat if you want at the same time. But I'll be checking after the first video to see what's going on, what people have said. And then if you want to say anything again, just cut on your mic and say it. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint. You probably can see it now, but I'm just going to reshare it just to make sure that we have volume for the videos. When I am showing the videos, at any point that you are not able to hear the video, please cut on your mic and just say, I can't see the video. And then I'll know to do something different, okay? So we'll get out of here approximately 1 o'clock. It might be a few minutes before, but we're going to learn a little bit about metacognition. All right, so the first thing that we're going to look at is beliefs that make you fail or succeed. So again, if you cannot hear or see the video when it starts, immediately cut on your mic and let me know. Otherwise, we're going to continue on until it ends, and then we'll see what's in the chat and what you have to say about it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the first in a series of videos on how to study effectively in college.
Okay, looks like we already have a lag here going on, so let me try this again.
Attending college is a huge transition, and the academic challenge of college-level coursework is a big part of it. We made these videos to help students make that transition. The information will be helpful, though, to people in almost any learning situation. I'm a cognitive psychologist, which means I study how people learn and think. I'm going to be explaining to you the basic principles of how people learn best, and how you can use those principles to increase the effectiveness of your study. I'm not peddling any quick fixes or magic products that's going to make you an A student overnight with little effort. Such things don't exist. The bottom line is this. If you use ineffective or inefficient strategies, you can study long and hard and still fail. But if you use effective learning strategies, you can get the most learning out of your study time. In this first video, we'll examine your beliefs to see how accurate an understanding you have about how people learn. All students base their study behavior on their beliefs about how they best learn. Do I need to go to class? Do I need to read the textbook? How much do I have to study material before I've mastered it? The more accurate your beliefs, the more effectively you'll learn. Let's start with some common misconceptions about how people learn that I call beliefs that make you stupid. If you hold these beliefs, chances are they're undermining your learning. Most first-year college students grossly underestimate the time required to complete assignments or study material effectively. I hear students say things like,
Dr. Chu, you're going to be proud of me. I read 8 chapters last night.
And I'll think, no you didn't. You skimmed 8 chapters, but you learned virtually nothing. Truly comprehending material takes careful reading and, more importantly, review. Always plan for assignments to take longer than you think. And always plan to have your reading finished for an exam well enough in advance to give yourself multiple days for review. A hallmark of students who are struggling is they study by trying to memorize isolated facts. Unfortunately, many textbooks encourage this by putting key terms in bold print and listing definitions in the margins. So, students get note cards, write out the definitions, and memorize them. The problem is that good teachers test for comprehension, how well you understand the concept. You simply don't get that if you memorize isolated facts. Many students believe that people are naturally good or bad at a subject and nothing can be done to change that. But academic success is much more a matter of hard work than inborn talent. Students say to me,
Dr. Chu, you don't understand. I'm really bad at math.
I tell them, no, Tyler, you can do it. You just need to really work hard at math. You have to commit the time and hard work necessary to succeed. Now, I recognize that people have jobs and family and other obligations, but you have to recognize that the time you have will limit your likelihood of success. But time and hard work alone do not guarantee success. A lot of students believe they are good at multitasking because they do it all the time. So they study while texting, checking social networks, email, and having other distractions. The problem is that these students never compare their performance while multitasking to their performance when they focus on one task without distraction. The research evidence is overwhelming that we are bad at multitasking. We're bad especially if one of the tasks involves concentration and effort, like studying. What we're good at is fooling ourselves into believing that we're good at multitasking because all those distractions are more fun than studying. But in order to succeed, you need to reduce, or even better, eliminate all those distractions. For every distraction you have, you reduce the amount you learn, increase the time it takes to understand the material, and increase the chance for a bad grade. So those are the beliefs that can sabotage your learning. Now I want to introduce a new concept that can have a huge impact on your learning. It's called metacognition. Metacognition refers to your awareness of how well you truly understand a concept. Accurate metacognition is one of the key differences between successful and struggling students. Weaker students are grossly overconfident in how well they understand the material. As a result, weaker students don't study as much as they need to truly understand the material. They take an exam, they're confident they've done well, then they're stunned when they find out they've done poorly. Let's see how this works. A few years ago in my general psychology class, I did the following. At the end of the first exam, I had students estimate what percentage of the questions they got right, from 0 to 100%. I then created this graph of everyone in the class based on their actual exam performance and how they estimated they did. Each point represents a student. If students had an accurate view of how well they knew the material and how well they did on the exam, their estimate should match their actual performance, and they should score on the diagonal. If they did better than expected on the exam, their points will fall above the diagonal. If, however, they were overconfident in how they did, their point would fall below the diagonal. Look at the results. There are a few students who scored above the diagonal and did better than expected, but most students scored below the diagonal, showing they thought they scored better than they actually did. And now look at the upper right-hand corner of the graph. These are the students who did best on the exam. Notice how most of these students are clustered around the diagonal. Now look at the middle of the graph. Here are the students who did poorly, and most of their points are far below the diagonal. It was the weakest students who were the most overconfident. They had poor metacognition. After the exam, I'll have students who did poorly tell me, I felt so confident after the exam, or I thought I really knew the material. These are all signs of poor metacognition. These students were underprepared, overconfident, and completely unaware of those facts. The problem for college freshmen is they spent years honing their sense of metacognition for high school. Now they come to college and their sense of metacognition is all wrong. A big transition in the freshman year is developing a more accurate sense of metacognition. The problem with poor metacognition is that it may indicate that you have poor study strategies. The hallmark of a poor study strategy is that it builds overconfidence without increasing actual learning. So therefore, you have poor metacognition. In order to improve your study effectiveness, you need to improve your study skills. And that'll be the topic of the next video.
All right, and hopefully everybody had a chance to look at that, and we'll just have a couple minutes that you can post in here. So what did y'all learn from the first video? You can put it in the chat or you can cut on your mic and tell us.
I think what I learned, well, my biggest takeaway was that learning takes time, so you cannot cram your information. It's not a rat race, and you're not going to learn it all with some flashcards. It's about comprehension.
Very good. Absolutely. All right. Anybody else?
I felt the same way, and just the simple idea that instead of just, his example was just under the keywords and memorizing the keywords versus understanding the material as a whole.
Yeah, really the comprehension of how every piece kind of matches and goes together is more important than an isolated fact. So very good. All right, what else did y'all learn?
Hey, this is Pat Barber. I was just going to say that the multitasking part was interesting because we think we're multitasking, but we're actually not focusing on what we should be doing. And I'm not a good multitasker, so let's put it that way.
Yeah, I would agree with you that everybody does it, but when you're studying, you definitely don't need to do it. So that's good. Looks like we have a couple people that have posted in the chat. So Anthony, the concept of metacognition, understanding the subject so well that you're able to really work with it instead of just passing a test on it. Absolutely. The whole trick is not just to pass the test, but to actually retain the information, and that does take a lot more effort in studying. Looks like we have a couple more people posting up in the chat. If you can kind of close that out and post it up really quickly, I'll read it, and then we will move on to the next video. So any other comments or chats? Thank you, Roberto. Yes, learning takes time. Very good. All right, hopefully y'all can still see everything. I'm going to see if it'll click to the next one. So take a minute here. If for any reason you cannot see or hear the video, it's getting ready to start, please let me know. Here is the second video.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the second in a series of 5 videos on how to study effectively in college. In the first video, we examined some basic beliefs that can undermine your learning. In this video, I'll explain some basic principles of how people learn and how you can use those principles to improve the effectiveness of your study. Let's start by examining how accurate your understanding is of how people learn. Take a look at the following statements. Pick the one that represents the most important factor in successful learning. Only one is correct. In order to find out the correct one, I want you to imagine you're in a classic psychology experiment by Thomas Hyde and James Jenkins from 1969. See if you can guess the results. The basic design of their study is shown here with 5 different groups of participants. Each group of participants was presented with a list of 24 words. The instructions the participants were given about what to do with the words varied from group to group. Once all the words were presented, everyone had to try to recall them from memory. Hyde and Jenkins looked at the impact of 2 variables on learning. The first one, on the left, is whether or not you knew you were going to have to recall the words after all of them were presented. If you're in one of the 2 groups in the intentional condition, you were forewarned that you would have to recall the words after they were all presented. If you were in one of the 2 groups in the incidental condition, you weren't forewarned about the recall test. It's like taking a surprise pop quiz. Any learning that occurred was incidental. The other variable Hyde and Jenkins looked at was how participants rehearsed or encoded the words, what became known later as level of processing. 2 groups had to listen to the words and check whether or not it had the letter E in the spelling. The other 2 groups had to rate whether or not they found the word pleasant. Now, why would this make a difference? If you're checking for E's, then you're focusing on the spelling of the word, which is called shallow level of processing. If you're rating its pleasantness, you're thinking about the meaning of the words related to your own experience. That's called deep level processing. So, say the word on the list is dance. If you're in the intentional condition, you knew that you'll be asked later to recall it. If you're in the incidental condition, you haven't a clue about the recall test. In the other variable, if you're in the e-checking group, you think about the spelling and mark down yes. If you're in the pleasantness group, you think about dance, you check yes if you like dance and no if you don't. The two variables combined to give you 4 different groups. There was a 5th group just told to memorize the words as best they could. So the list of 24 words was presented, 1 word at a time, and each group carried out its instructions. Afterward, all the participants were asked to recall as many of the 24 words as they could. Who do you think recalled the most words? Let's look at the results and see what happened and see what it says about learning. The average percent recall is shown on the y-axis. First, did the intent to learn matter? If it did, then the intentional learning groups should do better than the incidental learning groups. But they did not. Intent to learn had no effect at all. Now, look at level of processing. If level of processing matters, then deep processing, rating pleasantness, should recall more than shallow processing, checking for ease. You see that deep processing groups recalled a lot more than the shallow processing groups, regardless of whether they were intending to learn or not. Now, there are 2 key points here. First, people who use deep processing learn the material, whether they intended to or not. On the other hand, if people use shallow strategies, even if they wanted to learn, they did not learn. Second, people who process words at a deep level, even if they weren't trying to learn, remembered them just as well as that control group who were just doing their best to learn. So the depth of processing matters, and the intention to learn doesn't. You can have every intention to learn, but if you use a shallow strategy, you won't learn. Let me say a little bit more about levels of processing, because it's a powerful idea for student learning. Levels of processing says that memory is composed of a continuum of levels from shallow to deep. Shallow levels involve studying meaningless, superficial properties of what you're trying to learn, like mindless rereading or memorization. The deepest levels of processing involve thinking about material meaningfully, interpreting the information, and relating it to your prior knowledge or experience, or creating a mental image of the information. Deeper processing leads to better recall. You also have to understand the idea of orienting tasks. An orienting task makes people process information at a certain level of processing. Orienting tasks make people process information at a certain depth. In this case, checking for ease is a shallow orienting task, making people process words at a shallow level. Rating a word's pleasantness is a deep orienting task, causing people to think about the meaning of the words, process them deeply, and thus learn the words. Now let's return to the question of the single most important factor in learning. We can rule out number 1 because we just saw that intention and desire to learn are not important. Number 2 is also not correct. In the study, both groups paid close attention to the words to do their orienting tasks. Attention is not enough to guarantee learning. What about number 3? You hear a lot about learning styles. Some people are visual learners, others are auditory or kinesthetic learners. There's simply no good research evidence that supports the validity of learning styles, so forget about them. Besides, if you plan to be successful, you should become good at learning in multiple ways. What about number 4? I did make a big deal about committing enough time to be successful, but time alone is not sufficient for successful learning. That leaves number 5, which is correct. It relates to depth of processing. If you read a text without comprehension, or if you memorize definitions without really understanding them, you're using shallow processing and you will not learn. If you think about meaningful connections, you're using deep processing, and you'll learn whether you intend to or not. If you picked incorrectly, don't feel bad. Most people get this wrong. If you pick correctly, congratulations. You're on the right path to successful study. So, let's summarize what we've learned in the first 2 videos. Here are the factors which don't help or even hurt your learning. Now, I'm not saying that desire to learn, attention, or engagement are bad things, but deep processing is the crucial element. A lot of students want to learn, but they use shallow strategies, and they don't learn. Now, here are the factors which do contribute to your academic success. So how do we go about processing information deeply and developing a connected understanding of material? That's the focus of the next 2 videos.
Okay. Did y'all get to see that video? Did everybody see that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Sometimes I wonder when it clicks away the whole, it clicked away my screen where it showed my microphone. So I just wanted to make sure that y'all could see it and hear it. So what did you learn from the second video? Just take a minute to post in the chat or cut on your mic and make a comment.
I think that learning how you learn is like one of my major takeaways from that second video. You need to know how your mind processes information so that you save yourself some time and truly comprehend and learn what it is that you're taking on.
Very good point. Very good. All right, Anthony's posted up here in the chat. Work to improve your learning process because that's more important to your success than good intentions. Jean has got the 2 levels of processing, or shallow or deep, and Janine, deep processing helps you learn the material, whether you intend to learn it or not. So that's a good point. It looks like Stephen's posting something up. Anybody else have a comment on the second video? All right, if you have a comment, go ahead and post it in the chat. Looks like we have a couple people typing. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, learning styles don't matter as much as once believed. There has been some research on learning styles, and you probably do have a preference, that you have, but you can learn multiple ways. All right, if you're typing in the chat, please go ahead and finish that and post it. All right, Stephen, thank you. Okay, so learning styles don't matter as much as people thought. And Roberto, so you learn better the way they talked about. They said in the second video, I guess, we're talking about. So deep processing is very important. That's why, obviously, with the first video, you get rid of distractions, you spend adequate time, and then you think about what you're studying so that you're actually processing on a deep level. All right, I'm going to go to the third video. Hopefully, y'all will be able to see it and hear it. And then we'll talk about it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Stanford University. This is the third in a series of 5 videos on how to study effectively in college. Effective studying is more than just a matter of having a desire to learn and devoting sufficient time and effort. Students have to utilize effective learning strategies. If they use ineffective strategies, they can study long and hard and still fail. In this video, I'll explain the basic principles of how people learn best and how you can apply those principles to improve your study effectiveness. As we saw in the earlier videos, you can be highly motivated to learn, but if you use a shallow learning strategy, you simply won't learn. Shallow learning strategies focus on superficial aspects.
I apologize. Let's try that again. Making sure y'all can see the entire thing.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Stanford University. This is the third in a series of 5 videos on how to study effectively in college. Effective studying is more than just a matter of having a desire to learn and devoting sufficient time and effort. Students have to utilize effective learning strategies. If they use ineffective strategies, they can study long and hard and still fail. In this video, I'll explain the basic principles of how people learn best and how you can apply those principles to improve your study effectiveness. As we saw in the earlier videos, you can be highly motivated to learn, but if you use a shallow learning strategy, you simply won't learn. Shallow learning strategies focus on superficial aspects like memorization. But if you use a deep learning strategy which focuses on meaning and comprehension and visual imagery, then you will learn whether you intend to or not. So if deep processing is the key to effective study, how do we accomplish this while we're studying? Here are some basic principles for achieving deep processing and a question which will allow you to satisfy each principle. First, elaboration means making meaningful associations between the concept you're studying and related concepts. The associations can be among concepts you're studying or with your prior knowledge. The more meaningful associations you can make, the better you'll learn. Next, distinctiveness means that you make a clear contrast between the concept you're studying and other concepts. You need to understand the key differences among related concepts. Say you're in a general psychology class and you're learning about short-term and long-term memory. You elaborate the two by relating them together. They both hold information for later use. You also emphasize the distinctiveness between the two by focusing on the key differences. One has a limited capacity, the other has an unlimited capacity. One has very rapid forgetting, the other has much slower forgetting. Finally, you relate it to your own personal experience. I meet people at parties, I forget their names a few seconds later because of short-term memory. I still remember that time I got lost in the mall as a child because of long-term memory. The last aspect of deep processing is practicing appropriate retrieval and application of the material. By appropriate, I mean that you practice recalling the information and using the information in the way that your teacher expects you to be able to do. If the teacher expects you to solve real-world problems, then you need to practice recalling and using information in that way. If your teacher expects you to analyze hypothetical situations, you need to practice doing that. Instead of reading the material over and over, close your book and notes and recall as much of the information as you can. Write it down, explain it to a friend. Take advantage of questions that textbooks often have at the end of the chapter that ask you to review the information. Or take advantage of textbook websites that often have review tests. Now, one thing I've told you not to do is to memorize isolated facts. Here's the exception to that rule. If for some reason your teacher tests you over exact wording of isolated facts, then memorize isolated facts. So these are the basic principles of deep processing. Effective study strategies take advantage of some or all of these principles. Good students have multiple ways of studying depending on the teacher and the subject, but all their study strategies are based on these principles. You'll have to figure out the best study strategies for yourself, and in the next video we'll discuss some possibilities, but no matter what you do, they should be rooted in these principles. Here are two other important concepts you need to understand for effective learning: automaticity and overlearning. An automatic process is one that's so highly practiced that you can do it without any conscious thought or effort, like driving a familiar route where you arrive at your destination without even thinking about it. Any task that is practiced enough can become automatic, including study skills. When you get to college, you bring high school skills that are automatic. Developing effective college skills involves not just developing more effective skills, but overcoming those high school skills that were automatic and overlearned. Overcoming those high school skills is a big reason why developing effective college-level study skills is so effortful and takes so long. For most students, it takes conscious effort over weeks or even months. I have had students who've seen immediate improvement using the principles of deep processing, and if that happens to you, be pleasantly surprised. But for most, it's a process of ongoing improvement. You need to develop these skills and practice them over a long period of time. The good news is, though, once they become automatic, they'll be helpful to you in any learning situation. A concept that's related to automaticity is overlearning. Overlearning means that you don't just study material until you can just recall it. You keep studying it over and over again until you can recall it quickly and easily. Overlearning information helps prevent forgetting, and it makes recall fast and easy. If you're studying critical information that you'll need to know in the future as part of more complex learning, it's a good idea to overlearn it. In this video, we've operationalized deep processing into a set of principles you can use to achieve deep learning. I also talked about the pitfalls of bad study habits that are automatic and the advantages of good study skills that are automatic. Finally, I talked about the importance of overlearning critical information. In the next video, we'll use these principles of deep processing and apply them to common learning situations. We'll be looking at how to take notes using deep processing and also how to use deep processing while reading a textbook.
Okay, what did everybody learn from that video? Any insights?
I learned that when when he was speaking to the recall portion, I noticed that when I'm whatever chapter I'm in my current class, I seem to find things that reflect that. So, for example, a news story, and I'm like, oh, that's a breach of contract. And so I can relate it to my text in a real world way.
Okay, very good
So
example.
what he was saying just really resonated with me.
Okay, great. Anybody else have a comment on that video? You can type it in the chat or cut on your mic and say it. It's up to you.
Yes, he mentioned about the websites that were that are sometimes given by instructors. I usually ignore them, but I'm going to start utilizing them.
That's good. I know, you know, we give you a lot of resources and you have to kind of decide which ones you want to use, but I would check out all of them, even if you just, you know, briefly look at them. And then when you have more time, those are always important, and usually relate directly to and give examples of how to implement the concepts.
I have noticed just in the 3 videos just how you know, our everyday lives with, you know, social media and things we do in normal life, that we're actively skimming a lot of information throughout our lives. And I can see how when you go to try to actually learn something, how that can affect your deep processing. It makes me kind of rethink how I take notes during class, because I find myself, you know, leaving a class with a whole bunch of notes but not understanding the material, as opposed to trying to understand the material before I walk into class, for the class to be more review than anything else.
All right. That's a good point too. You really should just shut down social media, you know, especially when you're studying. Just try to stay away from it. All right. Roberto talked a little bit about elaboration and deep processing. So, you know, when you learn something, if you really know it, you can talk about it and talk about various aspects of it. All right, we have one more person posting up in the chat, and then we'll get to our next video. So try to go ahead and post that up as quickly as possible. All right, thank you. Okay, Tania talked about muscle memory. So muscle memory can be good, especially if it's physical muscle memory, right? You know, the actual muscle memory. But if you have taught yourself how to learn and it's incorrect and it's not really working for you, it might take you longer to change to the deep processing and elaboration and all the things that you need to do. All right, excellent. All right, let's go to the next video. This is our 4th one.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the 4th in a series of 5 videos on studying effectively in college. Effective college study is more than just a matter of a desire to learn and devoting sufficient time and effort. Students have to utilize effective learning strategies. If they use ineffective learning strategies, they can study long and hard and still fail. In earlier videos, I described the levels of processing framework, which says that shallow processing, which focuses on meaningless, superficial aspects, does not lead to effective learning. Deep processing, which focuses on the meaning and implications of material, does lead to connected learning. Then, I discussed basic principles for achieving deep processing. Effective study strategies employ some or all of those principles. You can use these principles to develop good study strategies that work for you. This video will give you a starting point. I'll describe for you some study strategies that are based on these principles. Think of study strategies as an orienting task that make you process information at a certain level. Good study strategies make you process information at a deep, meaningful level, focusing on comprehension and implications. Poor study strategies focus on a shallow level, which focus on superficial, meaningless information. Here are 3 research-based strategies for achieving deep processing while reading. The first is question generation. After you've read a chapter or reviewed a section of notes, generate some questions over the material. Try to make the questions as meaningful as possible. Questions about facts are okay, but questions that make you compare and contrast, to analyze, to make connections, to think about implications or generate examples are even better. Here's a list of questions that you might generate based on the videos so far. The first question is purely factual about the definition of a term. And that's okay as long as you don't just memorize the definition without understanding it. The second and third and fourth questions that are also about content, but they're asking about key arguments in the videos, which go to a deeper level than the definition. Question 5 asks you to compare and contrast, leading to both elaboration and distinctiveness. Finally, question 6 asks you to relate the information to your personal experience. Just generating the questions will help your depth of processing. Reviewing the material to answer them is even better, and you can always ask your questions to teachers. At first, generating questions will be a bit awkward, but like anything, with practice it will become easier and more automatic. The second strategy is to create a concept map of the ideas you're studying. A concept map is a diagram of nodes and links. The nodes are concepts or facts that are linked together. Here's a concept map I constructed for levels of processing. Concept maps take time and effort to do, but they don't have to be neat and perfect, and the very act of creating them helps you process information deeply. The third method is to practice retrieving and using the information in ways that your teacher expects you to be able to do. There are really two parts to this study strategy. The first part is to practice retrieving the information without referring to your notes and book. So close your notes and book and just practice retrieving the information. Explain it to someone else or write it down. The second part is to use the information in the way that your teacher expects. Some teachers test for facts, some teachers test for concepts. Is your teacher using multiple choice? Is your teacher using short answer or essay? Practice using the information in the way the teacher is going to test you. But just practicing recalling the information and thinking about how it might be used will be useful to you. You can take advantage of review questions in the textbook. Oftentimes, companion websites for the textbook will have review tests that you can use. After you've practiced recalling the test or recalling the information, you can check yourself against your textbook and your notes. This will help you to identify weaknesses in your understanding the material. Now, what about taking notes during class? Note-taking has three functions. First, it provides a summary of key points from the lecture that you'll need to understand and recall later. Second, you're creating a set of retrieval cues or memory cues for the information that you didn't record. You're only able to write down a small percentage of the information presented in the lecture. Your notes help remind you of what you missed writing down. The third function is that note-taking is an orienting task. Taking notes engages you in the class, and how you take notes determines if you process the information in a deep, meaningful way or in a superficial way. Note-taking that makes you process information at a deep level will help your learning. So, as the lecture goes on, think about key concepts, key distinctions, and key relationships, and be sure to write down examples. On the other hand, if you think of note-taking as writing down as much of the lecture as possible without thinking about it, then you're processing at a shallow level, and your note-taking will not help you to learn. This is especially a temptation if you take notes using a laptop computer. I actually prefer taking notes by hand because of the flexibility in the format of taking notes. But the real danger of taking notes by laptop is the temptation to browse the internet or check your social networks during the lecture. This kind of distraction not only reduces your learning, but it distracts those people around you. A few other things. If you miss information during a lecture, be sure to get it right away, either from the teacher or from the classmates around you. Second, taking good notes is very effortful and usually requires your full concentration. If you have trouble writing fast enough, then consider asking the professor if you can record the lecture. Next, borrowing notes from another student is a poor substitute for missing a class. You're much better off attending class and taking your own notes. Finally, notes are only helpful if you actively organize them, review them, and think about them. Let's now turn to deep processing while reading a textbook. The same principles of deep processing apply here. A lot of students like to highlight while they read a textbook. Highlighting can be seen as an orienting task. You can highlight for deep processing, which will help you to learn the material, or you can highlight for shallow processing, which will actually hurt your learning. Consider the following paragraph, which was modified from an old psychology textbook. It's tempting to go right to the bolded terms and highlight them. It's fast, easy, and pretty much useless. You've skimmed over important information and you've set yourself up to memorize isolated facts, a terrible study strategy. Here's how to highlight for deep processing. Read all the text, then be selective about what you highlight based on its importance and how it relates to the other information. Highlight connections, key distinctions, and applications. Don't highlight complete passages. Leave out unnecessary text. Good highlighting requires multiple readings of the text and meaningful decisions. It's slow and it's effortful. And to be most effective, you have to go back later and review what you highlighted. Here's how I would highlight the Freud passage. The first line of highlighting contains the main theme of Freud's theory. I highlighted the key parts of the definitions of conscious and unconscious and the breakdown of the unconscious into preconscious and unconscious. I have the definitions and the distinctions between them. Students may highlight a passage differently because they have different perspectives. The important thing is that you highlight following the principles of deep processing. Finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about group study. If the group uses effective study strategies and the norm is everyone works hard, then you will learn in group study. However, if the group norm is that everyone uses bad study strategies and there are a lot of distractions, then you simply won't learn. Studying groups is one of the easiest ways to fool yourself into believing you have really learned when you actually haven't. Here are some principles for effective group study. First, remember group study is a business meeting. Like all business meetings, there should be a goal for the meeting and an agenda. Everyone should come prepared and ready to contribute. So, set a goal for the meeting. For example, we'll review Chapter 8 of the textbook. Set conditions for participation. Everyone should have read the chapter and have 3 questions ready to ask about it. If you aren't prepared and can't contribute, then don't come. Everyone keeps the ultimate goal of learning in mind. Everyone has a chance to ask and answer questions from other group members. The result should be that any member can express the understanding of the whole group. In this video, we've discussed some concrete ways of using the principles of deep learning to guide your study strategies in common learning situations. Developing the effective study strategies for you will take time and effort, but with practice, they'll become automatic and they'll be effective for you. But there will be setbacks along the way. What happens if you blow an exam? That's the topic of the next video.
Okay. That was a pretty good video too. What did y'all get from that video? You can cut on your mic and tell us, or you can post it in the chat. All right, Roberto, thank you. Providing key summary, recording lecture, note-taking is a good process, and good, you've been doing that. I think it's very helpful to do that. Janine complimented Professor Early, so it's always good to, outline what's going to be on a quiz or exams or what the main focus or concepts are. All right. Stephen's been highlighting wrong. You know what? Everybody has something to learn here. I learned when I watched his video on highlighting myself that I was highlighting wrong. I was always into the key terms, and so to watch the way he did it, I think is very unique. Yeah, the highlighting technique, Tania, most certainly, I think it's something eye-opening for everyone. More details on highlighting. Oh boy, I don't know. I might be able to find something else from him, but I think he talked about it depends on the orientation. What are you looking for as far as how you would highlight it? So, all right, Natalie, I think is getting ready to post something, and then we're going to go to our next video. So please go ahead and post.
I was just going to say that when he talks about question generating and note taking, that, as much as we may not like having to generate questions or answer generated questions that professors provide, they do fully immerse you into comprehending the content more, because you're having to really think about answering these questions versus just reading 5 pages. And the note taking, as much as it might be easier to use a laptop or things like that, you do become fully immersed when you have to write it down for your style.
Very good points there. Rebecca's put here, I've been highlighting wrong also. And group study should set a focus. So yes, if you're studying with other people, please, set an agenda, make sure they have 3 questions to ask before they get there and that they have read everything. That's always helpful. All right, let's go to our next video. And I've got a summary video I hope we have time for, but it's okay if we don't. But I'm going to go to the 5th video. You should be able to see that in just a second. There we go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephen Chu. I'm a professor of psychology here at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama. This is the last in a series of videos on how to study effectively in college. In this video, we take on a situation that most students face at one point in their college careers. They take an exam, they make a terrible grade. For many students, it's the lowest grade they've ever made. All right, so you've blown an exam. You want to do the things that will help you improve your situation and avoid doing those things that will make the situation worse. The 2 worst things you can do is panic or go into denial. In my general psychology class, it isn't unusual for a quarter to a third of the class to make D's or F's on the first exam. But that exam is worth less than 20% of the final grade, and I offer ways to raise the low exam score. With over 80% of the grades still out, and with ways to minimize the low score, students have an excellent chance of raising their grade in the course as long as they take positive steps right away. Denial is not one of those positive steps. I have students who fail 3 exams and then come and talk to me and ask me what they can do to raise their grade. That late in the semester, there are very few options, so it's very important that you take positive steps right away. So what are the positive steps to take? It's critical that you try to identify what went wrong with your preparation on the exam. First, be honest with yourself. How thorough was your preparation? Did you commit sufficient time for both study and adequate review? Did you go to class and pay attention? Did you do the assigned work? I have students who come and talk to me and who act as if there's some magic shortcut which will allow them not to do all the work and still make a passing grade. They say things like, well, I haven't been doing the reading, but I have been coming to class. Now, I know there are classes where perhaps you can read the textbook and not go to class and still pass, or you can come to class and not read the textbook and still pass. But you're much better off in over-preparing for the first exam and then streamlining later for the later exams than you are in under-preparing for the first exam and starting out in a hole. The next thing you should do is review your exam to see what you missed, and then discuss your situation with your professor. It isn't fun to review an exam you did poorly on, but you need to use it to help diagnose what went wrong and how to change for the next exam. Were your mistakes spread out across topics, or were they focused on one particular topic? If your mistakes were spread out across topics, that means that you need a comprehensive improvement of your study strategies. If they were focused on one particular topic, then you need to try and understand why that topic gave you particular difficulty. Did you follow instructions? Did you misinterpret questions? If you misinterpreted questions, then perhaps you need to discuss with your instructor how to follow instructions or how to interpret the instructions correctly. Also, look at your errors and see if you had recorded the information needed to answer the question correctly in your notes. If you do not have the key information in your notes, then you need to improve your note taking. If you didn't have the information highlighted in your text, then you need to improve your reading. The key point here is that you have to study, take notes, and read at the level of detail and understanding that your teacher expects. After reviewing your exam, go discuss how you prepared and what you discovered from reviewing your exam with your teacher. Most faculty want to see their students learn and succeed. The key, though, is that faculty are most willing to help students who are taking steps to help themselves, like reviewing their exams and being open to different ways of studying. It's the struggling students who don't come to see us who are most likely to fail. Faculty are not your enemy. Next, you need to examine your study strategies to see if they are effective or not. If you haven't viewed the earlier videos in this series, you should do so. Poor study strategies are often appealing because they're easy and mindless to do, like skimming over your notes without really thinking about them, or reading over a text quickly without really trying to comprehend it, or studying it with friends when it really isn't studying. Bad study habits can also be effortful to do, but they don't require deep processing, like recopying your notes without really thinking about them or organizing them. Good study strategies are effortful, and they require you to process information deeply and meaningfully. Think about what your study strategies are making you do, and use the principles of deep processing to evaluate whether your study strategies are effective or ineffective. Note that ineffective and effective strategies can be superficially similar. So for example, mindlessly recopying your notes is a bad study strategy, but actively organizing and thinking about the connections within your notes is an effective study strategy. Finally, come up with a plan for better preparation and study to improve your scores. Here are some basic strategies you can use to help raise your grade. Commit the time and effort required to develop and use effective study strategies. Minimize distractions. Attend class. Set realistic study goals. Space out study time, avoid cramming, and maximize review time. Don't start letting some classes or assignments slide to try to catch up with others. This is a dangerous practice. Students start skipping one class or letting assignments slide to give themselves extra time in another. You can easily end up in trouble in both classes. You need to figure out a way to do the best you can in all your classes. Don't give away points. A lot of times I'll see struggling students give away points by failing to follow directions or skipping certain assignments. On a writing assignment, for example, students may be required to have a cover sheet on their paper. Some students fail to have that cover sheet and they lose points because of failure to follow instructions. Or on a writing or on a discussion assignment, students may be required to post comments to a discussion board. But some students will fail to do so because it's only worth 5% of the grade. But failing to do so, giving away those points, makes it that much harder for them to make a good grade. 5% is half a letter grade. Over the course of my career, I've worked with many students who've blown the first exam. Here's a list of things not to do. Don't be the student that keeps studying the same way and hoping for improvement, or waits until the end of the semester to seek help, or starts skipping some classes or assignments to focus on other classes and assignments, or falls farther and farther behind waiting to find time to catch up, or crams at the last minute to read the material, or doesn't do assignments because they are late or only worth a few points, or panics and gives up. Okay, so you blew an exam. Put yourself in the best possible position to improve your score. Diagnose your problems, come up with a workable plan, and set realistic goals. If you have poor study habits, take immediate steps to improve your study skills. Remember, this will take a sustained effort on your part, because not only are you developing more effective study skills, you have to overcome entrenched, ineffective study skills. This will take multiple attempts on your part to find the best study strategies for you, and there may be setbacks along the way. But once you develop effective automatic study strategies, then they will give you an edge in any learning situation.
Okay. So what did y'all gather from the 5th video?
I've done all of these wrong at some point, so I've definitely learned what not to do. However, I can still have, if I don't plan, I can end up cramming. And what I learned by cramming is you might still get a good grade on the test, but you don't carry the knowledge moving forward to the next unit or the midterm or the final.
Yeah, so that's the importance of the deep processing and good study skills. Otherwise, you're just skimming and it just doesn't stay. I mean, you just don't retain it. Janine, meaningful intention is key for me, and I have not been copying notes with intention. So, yeah, so I think you just have to be very intentional when you do study, and, you know, why are you taking, when you take notes, why are you writing down this particular information? What meaning does it have for you? How can you apply it? So those things are really important. Any other comments on the 5th video? Roberto's got here, I've been doing all of them right. That's good. All right, if you have a comment, cut on your mic. We have about 30 seconds left, and then we're going to start closing down. All right, Anthony, go ahead and post there your comment, or if you want to cut on your mic.
I wasn't going to try to post because I didn't want to take too much time, but I'll just cut on my mic to say, you know, I use a lot of Word documents when I take notes. And if you do that, you know, you're kind of able to put a lot of information from different assignments and different material that you have about the topic into one document, separate it into headings. You know what I mean? You can put the questions in there that you know, and answer them. I find that to be a good way to take notes myself about like one certain chapter in a certain class. You know what I mean?
Okay. That's very good. I mean, if you're in the business curriculum, a lot of stuff you learn in Business 110, Introduction to Business, you're also learning in the Principles of Management, the 137, and then it might flow into some of the business law and the HR. And so, you know, if you can combine courses of information where you're learning different aspects of a topic, that's always good. All right, we're going to go ahead back to the PowerPoint. There is one more video, but we're running out of time. We have less than 4 minutes. So just so you know, there is a developing a mindset for successful learning. And this one might be clearer for you to see anyway outside the PowerPoint, but it's kind of a summary of all of the 5 videos that you just saw. So that would be a good thing for you to review at a later time. This video, this presentation is on YouTube under WegTech Business Administration. These are 9 questions to improve metacognition. So is this similar to a previous task? What do you want to achieve? What should you do first? Are you on the right track? What can I do differently? Who can I ask for help? What worked well? What could have been done better? Can I apply this to other situations? So lots of questions you can ask to kind of help you get thinking about thinking as you're studying. So are there any questions before we kind of close down here? Any questions at all?
Do you have any tips on trying to achieve deep processing in classes that move at a pace that you're just struggling to beat the time clock on when all the assignments are due and you're not really deep processing?
Yeah, I think that can be a struggle for everyone. The amount of time and effort that you actually have to study is a lot more than people think. You really have to, for every 3 semester hour class, you are supposed to be putting in approximately 9 hours, so 3 times the amount of what the class is worth, approximately 9 hours on that topic. So that's a lot to ask, but that's the normal amount of investment that you should be making. So I would just try to, you know, the more that you can get in a quiet place, you can totally focus, and then you can take breaks and come back and review over time. I think that helps a lot with keeping the information retained. Thank you, Janine. Very valuable information. And then Stephanie Early, thank you so much for inviting your students and for your comment. Natalie, thank you. If you have any other questions or comments, I'll put my email in the chat. It's dhbarton@wegtech.edu. Feel free to give me an email. And again, please refer back to these videos as you are trying to improve your study skills. All right, Anthony, thank you. Learning how to learn better. That was some great information. Excellent. All right, thank y'all so much. If you have any other comments, we're here for literally 30 seconds and then we're closing down. So thank you for joining us. And I wish all of you wonderful grades. So please put the extra effort in. All right, thank you. Thanks to everybody. I appreciate it. We'll see y'all later. Have a great day.